Welcome back into the Fourth Man Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony, and thanks for tuning in to another episode. It has been a minute, and I'm excited. I'm really excited to be back. We got the 2025 season just around the corner, and I felt like it was finally time to make the return. It has been a while. We've been a little bit on a hiatus. Haven't dropped an episode since 2024. I usually leave my most recent episode pinned on the top of my Instagram post, and I think at some point, I was just, no offense to Rachel, but I think at some point it was just time to move on from that episode and get into the 2025 season, man. And I'm excited. Sorry for the long-awaited wait. It's definitely been a hectic time in my life, but just with everything going on, the season right around the corner, I felt like it was time. Just for transparency, I've actually made this episode probably 2 or 3 times at this point, and in various times, there's obviously different things going on that are important to the league. That's, a lot of good things, some things that have come up that have been maybe a little bit controversial, but I've tried to continue to make these posts, and it just one thing leads to another. I don't end up editing the episode, and because of how quickly things pick up in the off season, as soon as it hits a new calendar year, it just hasn't made sense to try and go back and post it. So this time around, I wanted to make sure I got it out. I wanted to make sure I recapped the draft a little bit and talked a little bit about what to expect going into the season, especially for anyone new to the show, new to the Big Three. And we just want to make sure that the audience is up to date on what to expect and kind of just our thoughts as someone who has been covering the league since year one, just kind of our thoughts of what I think could happen, some early predictions, and we'll obviously recap the draft, some early predictions on who I think will make the playoffs, and talk a little bit about just some other things that have been going on, and just part of what comes with a growing league. So I appreciate everyone who has continued to follow our social media pages. I think for whatever reason, this started as, for anyone who's been following for a while, I should say, this originally started as a blog, something I just wanted to write about as someone who was hoping to be a sports journalist at a college and who quickly shifted his career path. Then I felt like when I couldn't find the word for it always, or wanted to expand on it a little bit more, that's when the podcast came about in year 3 maybe. And here we are today. And so what's funny is originally what was supposed to be a podcast ended up being more, or I guess here recently has been more of a highlight page, more of a news site, a news medium to go to in terms of like Instagram and Twitter pages. And so, and even YouTube a little bit. I've been trying to post the highlights on there. So it's been really funny, just kind of the changes that we've had to make kind of on the fly. And it's just, for the most part through the time that we've been doing this, or the time I've been doing it for the past few years, it's just been me. So it's been really interesting, but I want to make sure that podcasting is the main focal point still, or at least an integral part of this. And yeah, with that being said, we're going to dive into it because there's a lot to cover. We obviously just had the combine. We just had the draft here. I guess it wasn't super recently, maybe like a couple weeks ago at this point. And honestly, I think a really good turnout just based off of what's happened in the past few years and some things that they've had to do on the fly. For anyone who's new to the audience, I always want to preface that this is a startup league. Think of it as a startup business. So adaptability is a big thing, and things are always changing and how you want to do things, and you're trying to learn what everybody enjoys and likes, and also what's best for the players and the new fan base. And so it's been a little hectic in terms of, hey, are we actually going to have a draft tonight? How is it going to be broadcasted? What's the combine going to look like? Is it going to be is the draft pool going to be open to the public? Is it going to be closed runs, that kind of thing? And so I think with everything being said and kind of the lessons they've learned, now expanding to a city affiliated league rather than more of that world tour that we're used to, I think ultimately it turned out pretty good. Like, honestly, the combine was star-studded. The draft pool was lit. There's for a lack of better words, there was a lot of, I thought, very strong candidates. Unfortunately, for only 16 spots, we even had NLE Choppa and Gilly pull up. I almost called him Damian Gillard, but Gilly pull up to the draft, and they were hooping a little bit, so that was pretty cool, just to get some more eyes and publicity on the league. Maybe a little bit of a PR stunt there, but I mean, Gilly kind of showed for the past few years in the celebrity game that he can hoop. And so I thought it was a lot of fun. And then the draft, I felt like it was broadcasted very well. It wasn't a long, drawn out process of who was going to be drafted. We had the draft show, I guess. So one time on the draft show, it was just talking about how I was just kind of stunned at how fast the draft turned around. They did a snake draft, obviously, with it being now 8 teams. And the second round started immediately after the first round ended. So that was cool. And I thought they just did a really solid job of putting everything together. Everything was organized. Everything was broadcasted well. They obviously had Thomas and Cube did a really good job on their show as they usually do. And ultimately I thought we had a good draft. It's tough, man. I mean, for the past couple of years, I've been fortunate enough to help the league a little bit with some behind the scenes things. And that draft pool was extremely loaded, but it was also extremely crowded. I mean, there was 100+ people. And again, because of, 4 teams either sunsetted, going on hiatus or whatever you want to call it, rebranding, whatever the case may be, with there being 4 less teams, that's essentially 20 less spots. And then, there's only 8 teams. And so, and the rosters are only 5 guys. So you only had 16 spots available for 100+ people, 100+ really good hoopers out there. And you have to account for guys that were on teams previously, guys that have played in this league before. Experience and continuity go a long way in this league, especially for an 8-game season. And knowing that you have to get off pretty much to a 1-1 or 2-0 start, or you find yourself in a hole very quickly in terms of trying to make the playoffs. And so it's really tough. And what makes it even tougher this year is that we really didn't have a lot of opportunity to see like new proven names in the draft. Like people think, oh, does the combine not matter? It's not necessarily that. It's just for guys that have proved themselves, sometimes they don't feel the need or maybe don't have the opportunity playing overseas to play in the combine. But for the new and proven names, we've seen guys come out of the combine and play in the league, get drafted in the league. And in some cases, those things don't always go well. So it's a risk you're taking. And now with 4 less teams and limited roster spots, unfortunately, that was the unfortunate part. We really didn't add a name that was, I guess, new to the scene or maybe was a less prominent name. We did add some new faces to the league, but just a little bit more proven, obviously a little bit well-known because of their NBA experience. But that was probably the most disappointing part. But overall, I think what this did create is a league of parity. I mean, this is going to be a really strong year with the 8 teams that we have. They're loaded. And some guys did it a little bit differently, but I think for the most part, we've seen the same strategy over and over when it comes to the Big 3 draft is you want a lot of versatility. And early on in the draft, you want a lot of size because size is a little bit limited in this league, albeit there's a lot of really good bigs in this draft. But I think it was no surprise that we saw Lance Stevenson go number 1 overall. Whatever the case is, just in terms of what Bees and Lance got going on from a one-on-one standpoint in their matchup on June 6th, or the fact that, in most normal years, just for the new audience out there, just to give you an idea, like typically when teams make the championship game, like they can run their rosters back. You can obviously drop someone if you want to, but typically you see the champions run their roster back, which is what we saw the Rick Hands originally do by drafting Jalen Johnson, Javier Carter. And typically the runner-up will do so, although I would say that for the most part, the championship runner-up will typically drop somebody and draft somebody new just to kind of change something up. If you didn't win it all at some point, I think it's just like maybe things weren't perfect, and let's just add a new piece to this and make sure that things are perfect. But for Three's Company, being a basket away, I think they felt like they had the right team. It was 2 really tough losses to Bivouac and how they lost, so I felt like they had the right team. But when a guy like Lance Stevenson joins the party and you have a new ownership group, and the new owners, obviously, for the deals that have been completed, the first 4 teams with Miami, Houston, LA, and Detroit, they kind of got first dibs. And so you take that opportunity, and it's really unfortunate because I think Nas is a really good player, but I understand wanting someone like Lance Stevenson who's a proven vet in the NBA, brings a lot from a versatility standpoint, takes some pressure off Beasley. And And the interesting part is there's been a lot of reports about like Bees and Lance, and maybe there's this like divide or beef that is reportedly happened. Like Beasley didn't want them to take them number 1 overall and was requesting a trade. Ownership group's not honoring it. Whether that's, for the hype for the one-on-one, I feel like maybe there is a little bit of that's true, just because I think Bees really did rock with Nas and what he brought to the table. I mean, first ever 4th man of the year and rookie of the year in the same year. But it's hard to not knock that pick, going with Lance. But overall, I mean, you think about there only being 16 spots. You think about 2 NBA vets in there that were probably always going to go, as much as Wesley Johnson was advertised and then Lance Stevenson putting his name in the hat last minute. They're probably always going to go. So that's now 14 spots. Then you think about the champs and Houston, which originally, I know Jeff Ayers has now filled the role where Javier Carta is playing for, their own ownership group's reason. But originally they were going to run it back, right? Because in most years they probably would. So that takes 2 more spots off. I mean, so now you're at a point where you already have only 12 spots. Most teams want a big because they're pretty guard heavy when it comes to the captains. And then most teams want guys with Big 3 experience because you want someone that's played. And then you add in as I mentioned, the continuity factor, how important it is to have chemistry off the rip so that you can get off to a good start. So it really does limit kind of who can go. And like what I love about this league always has been, it's not about your name, it's about your game. And I feel like based off the clips I'm seeing, I'm only seeing mainly the good probably, and some of the guys I know that's been really good in this league. That's the unfortunate part. It's like we didn't get to see that proven name. We didn't see guys that have deserved to be on teams and have proven that they deserve to be in this league based off accolades and numbers that they put up and success they brought to teams, really get to join this league. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit, being that I'm catching up. But overall, I wanted to say, just kind of go over the draft a little bit and go through some of these picks here. I mean, the 1 through 8, Lance Stevenson, Jalen Johnson, Ray Nixon, Wesley Johnson, Amir Johnson, Chris Johnson. Man, there's a lot of Johnsons. I'm just realizing 4 Johnsons went in the first round. I guess I'm just not realizing that. TJ Klein and DeJuan Summers. I mean, you look at that, and I want to say Lance made the most sense. Ray is a really dope, kind of Big 3 story, knowing that he was an undrafted guy. He was a guy that proved himself at the Combine and got his chance to show out in 2022, dropped 22 points and 6 threes in the last game of the season to help Tri-State win. And ultimately, he's kind of stuck with them, and coaches like him, and Jay Rich seems to like him. But I almost felt like Ray Nixon is a really good story, so it's cool to see that. But I'm a little surprised in the sense of not that he was taken so high at number 3. I mean, he shot 53% from 3 last year, and he can defend pretty well. According to Jeremy Pardo, he defended him pretty well. But I'm honestly surprised that the Amps took him. I really thought he was going to end up with the triplets. It sounded like they wanted the big anyways, but I thought he'd end up with the triplets at some point. Just because of the connection with Jay Rich and Dr. J there. And I almost feel like the Amps sniped him. I really do. I feel like they kind of stole him from under their wings. And whether the triplets say they wanted me or not, I'm sure that he was on their list of guys to draft. I think that the Amplifiers definitely stepped in and sniped Ray Nixon from him. So that was probably the surprise for me in the first round, I would say. I mean, because you do have Montrezl Harrell there, who, is a big, I guess. And you do have a little bit of a smaller team with Kimba as a guard. And then Jay Rich on the wing. I guess not super small, but Montrezl Harrell is maybe a little bit of a smaller big. But I do think that they were going to go with Ray just because of the continuity piece there and shooting 50% from 3. I mean, is my goodness, that's just nuts. So that was probably the biggest surprise of the draft. I thought an underrated pick of the draft, 2 underrated picks of the draft, were probably Chris Johnson to the Ball Hogs. I can't believe he slipped all the way to 6, to be real, just with what he's done in this league. And honestly, I feel like how much better he's gotten since being in this league. He's a really good player already, but just he looks better every year in this league. Was an all-star last year for the first time. So I thought that was a super solid pick by the Ball Hogs. I think Chris was kind of on the fence if he was going to be playing, but once his name was entered in, it was no question that he was going to get selected in the top 8. And then the other big factor, or the other I thought solid pick, underrated pick, was DeJuan Summers to Trilogy, former number 1 overall pick, former 4th man of the year. DeJuan Summers is a really good player. I feel like his role has changed a little bit with Ball Hogs, but he's a really good player. He's a dog. He's going to fit this Trilogy team really well, and you just add more size to, I think, a really well-rounded team, which we'll talk about just a little bit later. But overall, that was probably my most underrated picks. And then going back to, the amount of picks that there really are, with there being 16 teams. Again, a couple other factors here that kind of limits it. So I mentioned, Houston wanted to run it back, and then essentially the 305 kind of wanted to run it back, although getting Lance for Nas. But they did draft Sean Williams in the second round. I think the other thing to factor in here is that Power definitely went the family route. Not to say that those guys can't play. TJ Klein has been a part of Power for the past few years, helped them to the 2022 championship. And so he makes a lot of sense. He's shown that he can play. And then John Millsap got an opportunity last year with Aliens. It was really good for that Aliens team. I think they surprised a lot of people in how long they lasted in the season. But, you take up 2 more spots there, because if you are going the family route to not even just a family route, but you want to add someone who's been on the team for a long time, and TJ Klein, who there were rumors he was going to be a co-captain. But then, also factor in that Paul maybe wanted a chance to play with one of his brothers again. He only got 1 game in last year, and John was good. John was a good player last year. So immediately there, what I'm trying to say is, there was really only 10 spots. And so then it makes it even more difficult. Look at the names on here. I saw maybe a couple of people breaking down this draft, and they didn't recognize the names. But again, it goes back to experience goes a long way. As we've seen over the years, experience in this league goes a long way. Just knowing the rules from the get-go, which we saw some teams have that issue early on last year. Just not necessarily that they didn't get it, but they didn't adjust to it as soon. So experience and just understanding the way things are going to be called from a ref standpoint, the physicality of the league, and just adjusting to it. So I think experience does go a long way. And looking at the second round, basically everybody in this draft outside of Lance and Wesley Johnson have played in this league before. And a lot of these guys, I would say, multiple years in the league. Jalen Johnson, Ray Nixon, Amir Johnson, Chris Johnson, TJ Klein, DeJuan Summers, Frank Session, Jonathan Simmons, Javier Carter. All those guys have played, more than a year in this league. And so a lot of experience. Looking at the second round, I hate to keep riding Trilogy so hard, but I really like the Frank Session pick. It links him back up with Stack, who Stack really initially made him a co-captain in 2019 with Killer Threes. We saw the run that Frank had with that Killer Threes team and the culture he built. And someone that definitely deserves to be in this league, has proven himself, has been an all-star. And so I really like that pick. Just kind of adds to the culture and what Trilogy has already, and what they've added with, the addition of Isaiah Austin this offseason. Thought that was a good pick. And I guess I'm riding Trilogy and Ball Hogs because I thought Jonathan Simmons was a really solid pick as well. An all-star in 2023. Didn't play last year because of injury, but thought that was really good. Solid pick. And just, Ball Hogs is going to be a problem. That's a big team. Their smallest guy might be either Simmons or Murph, who were both 6'6" guys. So really big team there. And then looking at the rest, Sean Williams, I think, is an underrated pick. I know that the 305 there obviously are kind of the reiteration of Three's company, and you kind of want to run that team back. But I do think, move this out of the way, I do think that Sean Williams was really one of the most underrated players in terms of defensive players last year. He was tied for the league in blocks. To be honest, I've been through a lot of highlights this offseason. If you follow our page, which is at Fourth Man Pod, you're probably seeing you've probably following more for the social media side of things, seeing highlights or seeing your guys that you rock with that I'm posting highlights about. or just like waiting for news on that end, which is totally fine. But if you are following over there, you've probably seen me post a ton of highlights. And I've been through just about every single game for every single team. And I'm pretty sure the Big Three missed one block last year for Sean Williams. Basically what I'm saying is he should have been the top shot blocker by himself last year with 10 blocks. And just did a really solid job like anchoring the defensive end. Like, I think it's a team that wants to be strong on the defensive end. I mean, with their coach being Michael Cooper, who was, known for defense back in his NBA days. But I think Sean Williams is an underrated player. He does a little bit offensively just as like a guy in the dunker spot or offensive rebounding. But I think mainly from a defensive standpoint, he really anchors that defense in key situations, which obviously they were in the championship last year. But all that being said, a lot of really interesting teams. I think Triplets is a really interesting team, adding Amir Johnson and then Chris Allen, was kind of behind a guard-heavy team on enemies last year. But when he was on the floor, he made the most of his minutes, I felt like. I also did feel like at times like he had to make the most of those minutes as well. I mean, it's kind of I hope people understand the way I'm saying this. He made the most of his minutes, but he also had to make the most and showcase the most of his minutes to earn more of that playing time on a team that was coming off a championship. So I think that, not to say that Kemba's not healthy, but the last time Kemba was out, I think there were some challenges from a knee injury standpoint playing in Monaco. And I think he'll probably play a lot this summer. Like, I don't want this to be like a scare for anybody or like I know anything. I don't. I just think that we'll see a good mix of Chris Allen and Kemba Walker this summer, and I think we're going to get a good chance to see him. And ultimately, Triplets will be a very interesting team, in my opinion, with Jay Rich, two prominent NBA guys with Kemba and Montrezl Harrell. And then you add those Big Three experienced guys, one of them being a two-time champ. So overall, really solid draft. Biggest takeaway is like we obviously need those 4 teams and then maybe and then some for the future. So hopefully get there at some point. But I think the biggest thing is just getting back to 12. I don't know if people are aware, but this was an 8-team league for the first 2 years. And since 2019 to last year, it's been a 12-team league. And so, for a long time, there were, 60 players. 2019, they had 6-man rosters. But, yeah, for a long time, this has been like a 60-player league. And so it's really, it's an honor to be drafted in this league. I think politics or not, performance-based or whatever the case may be. Like, I think at the end of the day, you got drafted, and you're only one of 16 players to be drafted all season long. So pretty dope. And, these teams are subject to change. Teams make changes really early. The teams can make changes as early as week 3. So if things aren't going well, we'll see. We'll probably see some changes. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of really good names in the draft pool. But we do have a lot of star-studded teams. And with that, I was kind of thinking, like, what teams do I like the best? And I want to go ahead and make, like, an early playoff prediction. Way too early playoff prediction. Just looking at the teams on paper and kind of just what I know about them. And because of how star-studded they are, it's been really difficult to come up with a really good list or a solid list, knowing that there's not going to be backlash or knowing I'm not going to be dead wrong making these picks. But based off what I'm thinking, based off what I know about the league, and based off what I know about these teams, this is what I've come up with. And I couldn't even do 1 through 4. So these are going to be, this is in no order. But I think, so there's going to be 4 teams that make the playoffs out of the 8 teams. So half the league will make the playoffs. As of right now, the teams I like to make the playoffs in my way too early playoff prediction: the Boston Ball Hogs, the LA Riot, the Miami 305, and the DMV Trilogy. As of right now, I know there's probably going to be a ton of backlash. I'm probably going to be, again, I'm going to look like a fool at some point in the season when one of these teams is doing really bad and another team just comes out and really surprises all of us, or just actually blows the water out. let me start with the 4 teams and why I like them, and then let's go to the other 4 teams and just, I guess, kind of detail why I could be completely wrong about this and the fastest way possible. Because I guess I should really start. Let me start with the DMV, because between Trilogy and then obviously the Rig Hands, who were basically Bivouac from last year and they're the champions, that's the one I was kind of like on the fence about. But I really like DMV's team, and Trilogy is essentially running it back with the 3 kind of core guys on there, Steven Jackson being the head coach, Earl Clark, and Isaiah Briscoe. And last year, Trilogy stuck with their entire team all of last year, but they took some chances for sure. They added some new pieces, guys that had never played in the league, and I felt like early on we saw a lot of like mental mistakes, mental errors. There's some off games on the hands of like Briscoe and Clark at some points. But I felt like there was, the 0-4 start really put them in a hole. And the way they ended the season, being 4-4, being able to last all 8 weeks, it was pretty impressive in itself. Like, I mean, think about it. Like, Trilogy lost a game last year where Briscoe dropped 37 points. That's the Big 3 single game record for most points in the game, and they lost. And they were up big in that game. I just don't think that's going to happen. And when you think about the team they've constructed this year, right? Like, so you had a lot of new guys on that team. You also had James White, who was in the final year of his Big 3 career, now retired. But I mean, you had to have him on the team. He's been there since day one. He's a 3-time champion. So you have more depth. The guys you add are all experienced. You add Isaiah Austin, who's a former champion, Franklin Session, Frank Nitti, who's a Big 3 All-Star, has led killer threes. I mean, that was a down year for him last year, but he had a pretty solid year, and he's led this team to, 4 or 5 win seasons? Somehow they didn't make the playoffs in those seasons, but also helped them to the championship game. And then DeJuan Summers, who's experienced, playing with Ball Hogs, winning a 4th Man of the Year with Tri-State. So I think weighing that part out and then thinking about the Rig Hands, and for one, I mean, I think Gary Payton was an essential part to their team. Like, obviously, I know he's not playing, but he's a really good coach in this league. Like, Gary Payton's only not made the playoffs one time, and that was the first year with Bivouac. So I think he's essential. And we see how 3-Headed Monsters has been. Not to say that they were bad, but they haven't made the playoffs since Gary Payton left, outside of the 1 year with Reggie Theus. And so I think Gary Payton's a vital part to any team. Mix in the fact that, Jeff Ayers has played with Bivouac before, has played with the Green Brothers and Corey Brewer. But, you add someone new to the mix, an experienced player, but someone new to the mix. And I think, too, it's just like, I understand not necessarily needing to make a change. I know we talk a lot about this just in basketball in general, or it goes around social media a lot lately, where people kind of overthink things and make too many changes when they don't need to. But I do feel like that a lot of teams leveled up, and the Rig Hands are complacent and running it back with the team they got. And that's okay. Like, I could be completely wrong. Let's just start there. Like, that could completely be the wrong move because of how hard they play. I mean, they're coming off a championship run. But we don't see too many teams repeat. We've only seen one team repeat in this league, and that was Trilogy. Only one team repeat. And we see a lot of, we do see teams make the playoffs again the next year, but it's not always the case. And so I could be completely wrong in that regard, but in a team that's now in a league now full of 8 teams, I do think that a lot of teams have leveled up, and I think DMV is one of them. Another one I really like, and maybe this is a little bit of the NBA experience or NBA experience and bias, like playing a factor in it, but I don't think so. One is the 3-5. Like, I do feel like on what the Rig Hands didn't necessarily do, and not saying Jeff Ayers is not a good player, but I want to say Jeff is, necessarily a level up on Javier necessarily. And maybe it's disrespectful for me to say that, Lance is this huge level up on Nas because of what Nas did last year. I mean, Nas was incredible last year. So, but I do feel like the 3-5 did bring back the core of their team. And they added a different dimension to it. Like, I feel like Javier and Jeff are a little bit of a similar players, guys that can stretch the floor, play in the low post. They can be good defenders, right? I think it's a little bit different dimension that you bring to the team with the 305. First off, Lance is a little bit bigger than Nas. Maybe not as good of a scorer as Nas, but Lance does a little bit more in terms of rebounding, passing, and then can defend maybe a little bit bigger players. And you already have a really strong team that you've kind of had the foundation with. You have the best rebounder and the big three in Reggie Evans. You have the MVP and Michael Beasley. I already mentioned Sean Williams, and you have Rio. And so I think that's kind of the difference in the way I'm thinking about the Rick Hands and the 305 and why I think the 305 will make the playoffs again. You also have to think, like, they didn't win it all last year, so they have a lot to prove. Or a lot, I shouldn't say a lot to prove, but there's a lot of, there's a lot, maybe not to prove to themselves, but there's a lot that they're trying to achieve at the end of the day. Like, 2 really heartbreaking losses to Bivouac for 2, like, kind of insane reasons, right? Like, the first week, or the first time they played them, they lost because of a technicality, because of how they didn't have any timeouts and they called one. And the second time, we've seen the play. There's actually an interview I have with one of the refs that I don't want to necessarily say yet, but explains a little bit more about that play. Like, it looks like Corey Brewer's out of bounds on that play. So, but it is what it is, right? It's not like going to be the determining factor of the entire game, but 2 heartbreaking ways to lose, right? So I think with that kind of motivation, and then, the different dimension they're bringing to the team, I think that's why they're going to be in. And the Rick Hands aren't necessarily going to be in my prediction. The other 2 teams, Ball Hogs, I think it's just kind of due time. And I think they've constructed this team very well. The Ball Hogs, for anyone new to the show, have never made the playoffs. Never made the playoffs. And so now you bring in Gary Payton, who led the championship winning team last year. You got Kevin Murphy, who's been an MVP in this league, alongside Deshaun Stevens. And they did add a new guy in Scotty Hobson. But then you also go out and had Chris Johnson, an all-star, Jonathan Simmons, an all-star, 2 guys who also played together. This is a pretty accomplished team in terms of accomplishing the big 3. Deshaun Stevens, an all-star, helped Aliens to their only playoff game in their franchise. Kevin Murphy, like I said, the MVP, has led his team to the playoffs and to the championship game. So I think for Ball Hogs, it's a lot of reasons. I think they're due. I think of the coaching that they brought in, the players that they brought in, and honestly the size. Like, they're going to be able to do a lot with whoever's out on the floor. And I think if anything, like, maybe defense is a little bit of, I want to say a downside, but defense is maybe their biggest concern. But they have a couple good shot blockers. They have a lot of guys that can play on the wing, so they can switch anything. That's a dangerous team, in my opinion. And the final team is the LA Riot. You did add Dwight Howard, a little bit older, but based off everything that I've seen, a really good-looking Dwight Howard in terms of what we're going to see this summer. Bringing a couple guys that have won championship or have won a championship with enemies that are, they've really turned it up the past couple of years. Jordan Crawford, Elijah Stewart, really good captains. And then saw a little bit of Jeff Teague last year. He was an all-star with 3-headed monsters. And then Wesley Johnson, who I've heard really good things about. He's in really good shape, apparently, and he's known to be a 3-and-D guy. And defense is going to be critical in this league where you can be a little bit more physical. There's hand checking. So it's a good addition. And it was really hard to leave the Riot out, just knowing how good Jordan Crawford and Elijah Stewart have been over the past couple of years. Like, there's a case to be made that Jordan Crawford should have been the MVP a couple years ago. And sure, sometimes we add big names and we're disappointed by how these guys come out. I don't think that's going to be the case with Dwight Howard. I don't. I think he's going to be really good. So those are my 4. Again, I could be dead wrong, though, right? This is a completely star-studded league, a league where every team is really good. I already kind of mentioned my reason for the Rick Hands and why they could make it. Detroit, Joe Johnson and Jeremy Pargo are as good as it gets. I've already mentioned Ray. Darnell Jackson, who I made a post on a couple days ago, is maybe the most versatile player in this league, can do a little bit of everything. But I think the big reason here is, like, am I sleeping on Joe? Maybe. Maybe He is a little bit older, but he is a 3-time MVP. He has won a championship in this league. And Jeremy Pargo is pretty dynamic. So Detroit could definitely turn up and prove me wrong for sure. We got the Rick Hands I already mentioned. I mean, triplets. I mean, it's a little bit of an unknown again. Like Jay Rich, Kemba Walker, Montrezl Harrell, Chris Allen, Amir Johnson. I mean, there's some experience in there for sure. There's a little bit of continuity. I mean, you're adding 2 new guys to the league, so I'm a little iffy to, and I know it's kind of the same with the Riot too, right? But I think on triplets in, Jay Rich has kind of been in and out with some different injuries that he's faced, and so we need someone else to pick up the load. Like, can I trust 2 new guys to come in? One of them who also had, his fair share of I would say aching pains in his last year that he played professionally, in Kemba Walker. Montrez has obviously been playing around the globe, so he should be really good and ready to go. But I think that's just a little bit of a wild card team more than anything. It's not that I don't. Maybe I'm making excuses for him here on why they couldn't make it, but I think because they're a wild card team, there's a lot of upside to this team too, right? I just don't know what to expect from this team. I really don't. And Jay Rich, again, we've seen him play at MVP level before, but then last year he gets off to a really good start. I think he had 29 points in week 2, and then he went for 3 or 4 weeks last year where I think maybe 4 out of the 4 weeks, 3 of them he didn't score a point. So, and not to say that that's his only contribution, but I think he is a guy that needs to score. So, that's just, I never know what to expect. Amir's a 2-time champion. He's shown that he can get after it when he needs to. Just a wild card team. Ultimately, that's the best way to put it. And then I think Power's another wild card team. A very experienced team. You bring back Glenn Rice and TJ Klein, who have played for Power. They've led this team to a championship game as aforementioned. But you had a lot of new pieces. You had the Millsap brothers, one of them coming off an injury that we all thought he tore his Achilles. I mean, I would say all in terms of fans and the community, maybe not internally, but we all thought he tore his Achilles. So what do we expect from Paul Millsap? John was really good last year, but will John make the same kind of impact as a guy he's not going to be the 1 or 2 guy at this point. He's going to kind of play a different role. And then Greg Monroe was really good last year with 3-Headed Monsters. I felt like it kind of flew under the radar and what he did. But again, just a little bit of a wild card. Just don't really know how this team fits. Is there going to be a lot of continuity off the rip? I could expect it. I mean, maybe we should expect it. Nancy Lieberman has put together really good, solid squads that she's had to, they're just a close-knit team, but it's just a little bit of a different dynamic. That's been a team that has kind of looked the same for the past few years, and they're changing up a little bit. And so I'm sure they'll run a training camp at some point in Texas, and they'll all be really close. And in the middle of the year, they'll all stay in the kind of the same place just to build that team chemistry and culture that Power's so good at. So there, again, if Power made the playoffs, I wouldn't be shocked. I just, you can never doubt Nancy Lieberman. It's just the makeup of the team currently and how they're going to all mesh is a little bit of a question mark to me. So that's kind of my thought process. Take it for what it's worth. Again, let's put it this way. There's been years when enemies first joined this league and they made some crazy addition or got the number 1 pick, and I really had a lot of belief in them, and they let me down. So take it for what it's worth. I'm obviously wrong a lot of the time, but with 8 teams, it makes it a little bit easier to make those picks. And this is just based off historically the league that I know, and then what I'm thinking about these guys and the makeup of these teams this year. So overall, that being said, it should be a great league. I mean, it wouldn't be crazy if all 8 teams were still in the playoff mix, come week 5, week 6, whatever the case may be. So could just be them beating up on each other last year, or this year. But I don't expect Enemies was 6-0 last year and Bivouac was 5-1. I don't expect that this year. I don't think there's going to be a bad team that they can just beat up on, or a couple bad teams they can beat up on. I think any given night you could see someone take down the other. So, but as of right now, the Ball Hogs, the Riot, the Trilogy, and the Ball Hogs, the Riot, the Trilogy, and and why am I missing the other team? The 305. God, I got to get used to some of these names. 305 Trilogy, Ball Hogs, and the Riot are the 4 teams I think are going to be in the playoffs come late July, early August. So that's what I'm thinking. Last thing before I wrap up the episode is I just want to talk a little bit. I mean, I've kind of talked about it throughout the entirety of this episode, but just why, there's been a lot of talk about, Nas, or I should say a lot of talk about guys that didn't make teams and probably were pretty deserving. I bring up Nas because Nas is probably the name that I've heard the most. And he's got a huge support system, but rightfully so, right? I mean, like, again, the accolades he won last year and winning them both in the same year was unprecedented and hadn't been heard of. And the impact he made last year, obviously helping his team to a championship game, is unheard of. But I mean, I guess why I bring it up is just why I'm bringing it up again is kind of for the reasons I was talking about earlier. It's just really hard this year with the new structure of the league, the owners, less teams. As much as we make a case for the guys that are in it, it's so easy to also make a case for the guys that aren't in it. And at the end of the day, there's only 16 spots. And all I can say is that throughout every single Big 3 year that I've covered and watched and that there's been, we're always going to see at least, a handful of guys that we expected to be in the league from the start finish the year with those teams. And I think they'll be no different. I mean, guys Nas isn't the only one. Like Body Bag, Brandon Moss, number 1 pick last year, an all-star last year, had an amazing season, undrafted. There was names like Cle Anthony Early, Jordan McRae, Sir Dominic Pointer, all in the draft pool. Really good players. Darius Johnson Odom, like guys that I've seen play before, guys that I've kept up with overseas that are having really good seasons or have had really good seasons. Not in this year. Like, didn't get drafted. Dominique Johnson, Mike Taylor, Jody Meeks. Like, there's a ton of guys. Like, all those guys are all-stars. All those guys were captains. Dominique Johnson probably should have been an all-star, but he's been a 4th man of the year. Guys that have won accolades. I think all those guys should have been guys that were drafted. Weren't. Went undrafted. I think at the end of Hezigod in there. Say what you want about Hezigod. 2023 Big 3 Rookie of the Year. 21 points per game. Unheard of. He had the previous scoring record. There's a ton of guys I think that should be in this league. At the end of the day, it's just really hard because of the lack of limited spots. And really, I bring it up as a case like, hey, continue to voice those opinions. Let's continue to urge not only the league to expand and have more teams, but that stems from, more credibility to the league, which I feel like it's earning year over year, and more interest in the league. So ultimately, there's more billionaires out there, or I guess millionaires, because these teams aren't as costly as maybe a normal professional sports team. Or even like groups, like it just I guess convinces more of those guys that maybe have a little bit of hesitation, like buying a team, to go all in on those teams and purchase those teams. And hopefully this, if they do expand, I would assume if they expanded, it would be back to 12 teams. But if they do expand, it's like 12, 16 down the road. Like, we'll get to see just more of everybody, right? Not even, because think about it. What really sucks is, again, it goes back to guys that have proved themselves or get a chance to prove themselves and get to join this league and have an opportunity. Like, we're not really getting a chance to see that this year. It's a lot of proven names, and while it'll make for great TV, great competition, we do like the underdog story. We do occasionally see a couple guys that people take a chance on and succeed and do really well. Like, we want more of that. Like, personally, me, I want more of that. Like, it's what makes the league fun. It's not about your name, it's about your game. And what sucks right now is, like, think about it. We've gone the European route where we had the number 1 3-on-3 player in the world join this league and make a name for himself, get drafted, be an all-star, and Doosan Bullet, whose jersey's back here. Shout out Dusan. He made a name for himself, and ultimately he got to be a captain and brought in other guys from FIBA, and we saw that team make the playoffs, and that was just like kind of a fun experience just to see how they compete. And it'd be cool to see more of those guys come over. Like we've seen kind of the YouTube era in a sense, and guys I mentioned, which Nas, Body Bag, Hezzy, guys that, people were sleeping on or didn't think they could do it against the pros or didn't think that the YouTube basketball scene was necessarily like a professional status, but we saw them how they did in this league. We saw them dominate at times. And I guess kind of make a name for themselves and kind of just showcase like, hey, there's more to this. Like we really do this. It's not just YouTube is, you might see things on YouTube, but don't get it twisted. So we want more of that. I want more of that. And not to mention, it would be cool to see guys like Jordan McRae, Queen Anthony Early, names that we haven't heard of in a while that have played at the NBA level that are playing really well overseas in the summer in America, right? Or internationally, whatever the case may be. However this league forms, I don't know. They're apparently having a league over in Australia. The schedule says North America. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think I bring all this up hopefully to ease a little bit of the tension that maybe people have toward the league, because it's not the league's fault at the end of the day. Like they give a lot, and I'm not going to say the league is perfect. I love this league, but I know that there's things that could have been done in a better way for sure. Not just with the players, but on the business side of things with the, and I talked about this, trying to make this episode a million times, but on the NFT side of things with the minority owners, with kind of the seed investors, like there's definitely things that they could have done in a better way for sure. But in this instance, when it comes to guys being drafted, it's not necessarily the league's fault. They give a lot of authority to captains. I mean, owners obviously now have some authority, but even so, like captains, like being a captain, like the whole point of that is you get to be the GM. You get to consult with your coach and your owner and your co-captains in order to make those decisions. So it's not necessarily the league's fault there. So I hope it eases the tension just a little bit there, and I hope it urges more people to continue to state those things, wanting Nas. And I know, because like again, it's really not the league's fault. But you don't think the league would have wanted Nas in this league again this year? I mean, the story's right itself with what we've got going on. I mean, the back and forth he had with Isaiah Briscoe, like we could really see that in a one-on-one again this year. The back and forth he's had a little bit with Lance Stevenson. If he was playing for a different team, there's kind of a revenge era there. I mean, there's plenty of storylines that you could create that would make for good television with Nas Core. I don't think the league was like, oh, hey, let's keep him out of here. Nas is just one name I'm bringing up, obviously. Like I think you could have made that case for a lot of guys in the storylines they would have brought. But he's the one I've seen, he's the name I've seen the most, and so that's why I'm touching on him. But my point is, like, hopefully we see a lot of those guys this summer and get that opportunity. If not to say I want to see anyone get injured or anything, but if there are some early struggles, like, let's make the switch. There's plenty of options. But at the same time, like, in this case, I think people can take it easy on the league. So that's all I got to say. Obviously, I would love to hear from anybody that's listening to this or has been a long time listener and what your thoughts are. Any kind of feedback. Yeah, drop it in the comments. Drop it in, it doesn't have to be on YouTube, social media, wherever the case may be. DM me. I always want to talk about the Big Three. I love this league so much. And again, while things have not always been done, I guess personally for me, in the way that I wish they've been done, I do think there's a lot of good things that the league is doing, has put on, and just creating a different avenue and platform for maybe guys that we didn't get to see in the NBA for a long enough time, or a platform for guys that are getting a chance to prove themselves that we've seen over the years. And just a chance to see, some of your favorite players play for a little bit longer and go crazy and not do so in like an elongated season. A short season in the summer with 8 regular season games, 2 playoff games, and a celebrity game, an all-star game now, and just a lot of fun. So all that being said, I appreciate everyone who's tuned in. If you're a long-time listener and you are tuning back in, I really appreciate you guys. For anybody new to the show, welcome. I hope you guys stick on for the journey this year. Just so you guys know, during the long-ass offseason that we have in the Big 3, the longest offseason in sports, we've always kind of said on the show, we only try to post like once a month or so, I would say. That kind of like didn't do the best with that this offseason, but during the season, we ramp things up. We try to do things on a weekly basis. We give recaps, we give previews, have a lot of player interviews. A lot of these interviews this year will probably be with guys that have been on the show before because there aren't a lot of new faces, but that's okay. Hopefully we can get some new ones on here as well with guys that haven't, agreed or said anything or, responded to me in the past, but hopefully, we can get some newer faces on the show and hear from them as the league continues to grow. So thank you guys. We appreciate it. That being said, we will have a guest on at some point next week or for next week's show or in the next show, I guess you should say. I don't know if it'll be for next week necessarily, but that's hopefully the case. Until then, I appreciate everyone. Make sure you guys are following the socials at 4th Man Pod, 4TH Man Pod, and got the NBA Finals coming up, and then we will see what happens with the league. But make sure you're following over there for any breaking news, for any highlights, and we'll see you guys next time.